My name is Tavabel, and for 35 years, my family saw me as the walking emergency fund. The reliable one, the quiet one, the one you only call when you need something. They never called to ask about my day. They called to ask about my paycheck. This Christmas was supposed to be different. I had a plan. I just didn't know they would hand me the perfect moment to set it in motion on a silver platter right between the cranberry sauce and the honey-glazed ham. Every Christmas at my parents' house was a performance, a beautifully staged play where everyone had a role. My mother, Eleanor, was the director, perfect hostess, perfect hair, perfect lies. My father, Robert, was the stoic patriarch, nodding along to whatever narrative kept the peace and the cash flowing. My older brother, Marcus, was the golden child, the successful entrepreneur, at least according to the stories they told. His wife, Chloe, was the trophy, smiling vacantly and rearranging her designer napkin. And me, I was the stagehand, unseen, unheard, unless a prop was missing, unless someone needed a financial prop. This year, the air in their sprawling suburban home was thicker than the gravy. I could smell the tension, sweet and clawing like the pine-scent candles my mother lit in every room. I arrived in my simple 7-year-old sedan, a car they constantly urged me to trade in for something less embarrassing. I carried one carefully wrapped gift, a donation made in the family's name to a local literacy charity. I knew they'd hate it. That was part of the point. The house was a monument to borrowed glamour. The towering tree dripping with coordinated gold and crimson ornaments. The imported table linens. The crystal that caught the light and fractured it into 1,000 sparkling lies. It all looked expensive, and it was. I just wasn't sure anyone had actually paid for it. Tova, darling, you're late. My mother chirped, air-kissing my cheek without making contact. Her eyes swept over my simple navy dress. You look comfortable. Traffic was light, actually, I said, offering her the gift. Merry Christmas, Mom. She took it, felt its lightweight nature, and her smile tightened. How thoughtful. Put it with the others. She gestured to a mountain of lavish boxes under the tree. Mine looked like a pauper at a palace ball. I found my father in his study, already pouring a heavy scotch. Tova, good. Your brother was just telling me about his new venture. A revolutionary app for what was it again? Marcus. Lounging in the leather wingback chair that was once my grandfather's waved a dismissive hand. It's complex, Dad. Market analytics, AI-driven consumer behavior prediction. We're seeking Series B funding. He flashed me a grin that didn't reach his eyes. Maybe Tova can explain it. She's good with numbers, right? For like taxes and stuff. I manage financial portfolios, I said evenly. Not for the first time. For a living. Of course, my father said as if I'd said I sorted socks. A steady job. That's good. Security. Their favorite word for my life. It meant I was predictable. It meant I was safe to exploit. For years, I'd provided that security for them. The down payment on Marcus' first failed business, the bailout for my mother's disastrous interior design side hustle, the endless loans to cover my father's bad investments, which were really just cover for his gambling. My savings account had been their personal ATM, and I had been the too willing teller programmed with guilt. The breaking point came 8 months ago. I'd been diagnosed with a health scare. Nothing fatal, but a loud clanging wake-up call. Sitting in the doctor's office, staring at the stark white walls, I realized I had nothing to show for my life but a depleted bank account and a family who saw my kindness as a congenital weakness. I had spent my adulthood funding their illusions while my own dreams sat in a drawer gathering dust. That day, I started building a vault, not just around my money, but around my life. I quietly hired a financial advisor, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Naomi. I changed all my passwords, opened new accounts at a different bank, and began the slow, meticulous process of redirecting my finances. I created a holding company, Bell Holdings, so anonymous it was virtually invisible. I started investing wisely and quietly. And I began documenting every single transaction I'd ever made with my family. Every loan, every guilt-induced transfer, every time I'd paid a bill that wasn't mine. The paper trail was a novel of betrayal. I also discovered things. Things my parents had hidden. The second mortgage on this very house. The liens on Marcus' so-called assets. The fact that their lavish lifestyle was a house of cards and my money had been the shaky foundation. I decided this Christmas would be the last one spent under their roof of lies. I was moving across the country in January for a promoted position, a fresh start I'd earned and funded myself. I planned to tell them after dessert, a quiet, firm declaration of independence. But they, as always, had their own script. We sat down to dinner. The table groaned under the weight of the feast. My mother beamed, toasting to family, prosperity, and togetherness. The irony was so dense you could cut it with a sterling silver carving knife. Then, as the plates were being cleared for pie, my father cleared his throat. The signal. All eyes turned to him. Now, while we're all together and in the spirit of generosity, he began, his voice oozing false warmth, we have a small family matter to discuss. A little opportunity. My heart sank. Here it was. The annual Christmas shakedown. Marcus leaned forward. My Series B funding hit a snag. The lead investor pulled out. But it's fine. It's a blessing. We just need a bridge loan, a temporary infusion to get us to the next milestone. He looked directly at me. A $150,000. Tova, you've got that sitting in your savings, right? You never spend anything on yourself. It's just sitting there. The room waited. Chloe nodded encouragingly. My mother looked at me with wide, pleading eyes. It would mean so much, Tova, for your brother's future, for the family. I took a slow sip of water. The cold liquid was a shock to my system, grounding me. No, I said. The word hung in the air, simple and absolute. My father's genial mask slipped. What do you mean no? I mean I won't be providing a bridge loan, I said. My voice calm. It's not sitting there. It's working and it's not available. Marcus scoffed. Working in your little credit union account? Come on, Tova. Don't be selfish. This is family. Selfish. I repeated. I've given this family over $400,000 in the last 10 years. Not one penny has been repaid. That's not family. That's a subsidy. The temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees. My mother's hand fluttered to her pearls. Tova, that's a horrible way to look at it. We're not a business. We help each other. Do we? I asked, looking at each of them. When have you ever helped me? My father slammed his hand on the table, making the crystal jump. Enough. This is embarrassing. Your constant penny pinching, your lack of ambition, and now this. We ask for one meaningful contribution to your brother's success, and you behave like this. Stop begging us for understanding and just do the right thing. I almost laughed. I was begging them. The projection was so perfect it was artistic. My mother nodded, tears of manipulation welling in her eyes. He's right, Tova. It's embarrassing watching you cling to that little safety net while your family needs you to dream bigger. Just stop begging for money to be withheld. It's beneath you. Everyone at the table, Marcus, Chloe, my aunt, and uncle who were visiting and knew nothing, nodded in agreement with my parents. The united front against the miser, the ungrateful daughter. In that moment, any final shred of hope I'd clung to, that they might see me, might value me, dissolved. The warmth left my body, replaced by a cold, clear certainty. They had given me the opening, the perfect public opening. I smiled, a small, quiet smile that made my brother frown. What's so funny? He snapped. Nothing, I said, placing my napkin neatly on the table. You're right. This is embarrassing. I reached into the pocket of my dress and took out my phone. The room watched, confused. I didn't look at them. I found the number I'd pre-saved under a simple contact. Plan B. I put the phone on speaker and set it in the center of the table, right next to the porcelain gravy boat. The line rang once, twice. Then a crisp professional voice answered. This is Margaret speaking. Account verification, please. Every eye was locked on the phone. My father's face was a thundercloud. My mother looked genuinely baffled. I leaned toward the phone. My voice clear and steady in the silent dining room. Freeze account. Code final 27. There was a brief pause on the line. The click of a keyboard confirmed. Margaret's voice echoed in the hushed room. Primary holdings frozen as per directive. All linked subsidiary accounts and authorized user access are now suspended. Would you like the secondary action initiated? I looked up, meeting my father's widening eyes. Yes, I said, never breaking my gaze. Initiate it now. The word initiate seemed to hang in the air. A tiny bomb that had already gone off somewhere they couldn't see, but could feel in the sudden chill. For a few seconds, there was only the sound of Margaret's efficient typing through the phone speaker and the faint, tiny echo of Christmas music from the kitchen radio. My father was the first to break. What is this? What childish game are you playing, Tova? His voice was a low growl, but I could hear the thread of unease in it. He was used to games he controlled. Margaret's voice came back clean and clear. Secondary action confirmed. All scheduled transfers from your protected assets to external accounts flagged family liability have been halted and are under review. Notifications of account suspension have been dispatched to all secondary account holders. Is there anything else, Miss Bell? No, Margaret. Thank you. That's all for now. I reached over and ended the call. The silence that followed was absolute and deafening. My mother found her voice a high, strange sound. Secondary account holders. What is she talking about? Robert, what accounts? My father didn't answer her. He was staring at me, his face slowly draining of color as the pieces clicked into place in his mind. He knew. He knew exactly what accounts. Marcus, slower on the uptake, just looked furious. Did you just freeze your own accounts? Despite us? That's the most pathetic, petulant thing I've ever. Not my accounts, Marcus. I interrupted, my voice still calm. It was a strange calm, the kind that comes after a long storm has finally passed, leaving everything washed clean and quiet. Your accounts, the ones linked to mine, the ones with the authorized user cards in your wallets, the lines of credit in your name that are backed by my assets, the family liability accounts as my bank so accurately labels them. Chloe's perfectly sculpted eyebrows shot up. She looked at Marcus, a flicker of real panic in her eyes for the first time. Marcus, my card, the platinum one. You said it was from your venture capital. Marcus opened his mouth, but nothing came out. My aunt, a kind but oblivious woman, leaned forward. Tova, dear, I'm confused. What does this mean? It means, at Helen, I said, turning to her, that for the last several years, my parents and brother haven't been spending their own money. They've been spending mine, or rather, the credit extended against my savings and investments. I was the collateral for their lifestyle. My father finally erupted, pushing back from the table so violently his chair screeched. That is a lie. A malicious, disgusting lie. Those are family accounts. Your mother and I set them up for your benefit to help you build credit. Really? I said. I reached into the small handbag I'd kept by my feet and pulled out a slim folder. I didn't need many papers, just the right ones. I slid a single sheet toward my aunt. It was a bank statement from last month. The account was in my name and my father's. The list of transactions were a catalog of their life: country club dues, payments to a luxury car lease company, a deposit to an online brokerage I knew was my father's gambling portal, thousands in charges from high-end department stores. Notice the authorized user cards, I said, pointing ending in 0004. Robert Bell ending in 0005, Eleanor Bell ending in 006, Marcus Bell. My savings account, which used to hold over $300,000, is now linked as security for this line of credit. Its current balance is $12,000. My mother snatched the paper, her eyes scanning it. Her hand began to tremble. You had no right to look at this. This is private. This is your father's management of our family assets. My assets, Mom, I said softly. The ones you told me to conserve. The safety net you mocked. The one you've been quietly burning for fuel. The scene began to unravel, not with shouting, but with a sickening, dawning horror on their faces. My father's bluster was gone, replaced by a frantic calculation. He was thinking of the notifications Margaret had mentioned. They would be hitting phones and emails right now. Declined cards at stores, frozen accounts, alerts as if on cue. Marcus' phone buzzed on the table. Then my father's in his pocket. Then my mother's from the living room. A chirping melody that suddenly sounded like an alarm. Marcus looked at his screen and went pale. What is account access suspended pending primary holder verification? He looked at me, his bravado replaced by confusion. What did you do? I removed myself as the primary holder, I said. Or rather, I instructed my bank and my holding company to recognize only my sole new signature. The old joint accounts, the ones you all had access to, are obsolete. The financial links are severed. My father's phone rang. He fumbled it, looking at the caller ID. It was the country club. He silenced it, his face ashen. You can't do this, he whispered, but it lacked conviction. He knew I could. He just never believed I would. You forged my signature on the original linkage documents, didn't you, Dad? I asked. The question hung in the air, more shocking to my aunt and uncle than anything else. When I helped you refinance the house after your investment down earned 5 years ago, that's when you tied everything together. You didn't just need my savings for the down payment. You needed my financial reputation to secure the credit you'd all run through. My mother began to cry, but they were no longer the practiced, delicate tears from before. These were ragged, ugly sobs of true panic. You're ruining us, your own family on Christmas. No, I said, standing up. I felt tall. I felt solid. You were ruining me. You were ruining each other. I just stopped handing you the tools. I looked at my aunt and uncle, their faces masks of shock and dawning understanding. I'm sorry your Christmas dinner was disrupted, but you should know the truth. The beautiful house, the cars, the club memberships. It's all a fiction. Paid for with money they didn't have, secured by a daughter they didn't respect. I gathered my single unwrapped gift from under the tree. My aunt reached out and touched my arm. Tova, where will you go? I gave her a real smile. Small but warm. Home, Aunt Helen. I'm finally going home. I walked out of the dining room through the foyer with its glittering chandelier that was probably on a payment plan linked to my now frozen credit line. I didn't look back. I opened the front door and stepped into the crisp, cold night air. It felt like my first breath in years. Behind me, as the door swung shut, I heard the chaos begin. It wasn't loud yet. It was the sound of whispers sharpening into accusations, of my father's low, desperate voice trying to explain, of my mother's weeping, of Marcus shouting, "What do you mean my cards are dead?" I got into my sensible, paid-off car and drove away from the beautiful house on the hill. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt weary and sad and incredibly, overwhelmingly free. The silence in my own car was not empty. It was full of possibility. The first part was over. The truth was out. But I knew them. The lies were their native language. They wouldn't surrender. They would regroup. They would attack. And I was ready. The quiet of my apartment was a physical relief. No curated scent of pine. No tension humming beneath Bing Crosby. Just the soft hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of city traffic, a lullaby of normally. I placed the charity gift on my clean, sparse kitchen counter and took a deep, shaking breath. The adrenaline was fading, leaving a hollow ache in its wake. I had just dynamited the bridge to my family. Even if it was a bridge built on lies, the emptiness where it used to be was terrifying. My phone, face down on the counter, began to vibrate, a soft, insistent buzz that quickly became a frantic dance. I didn't need to look to know the cascade of names lighting up the screen. Mom, Dad, Marcus, Mom again, Dad again. Then the text started, a symphony of notification pings. I made a cup of tea, methodically heating the water, steeping the bag, watching the amber color bloom. The phone buzzed and buzzed, a trapped insect on the formica. When the tea was ready, I sat at my small table, scrolled to the message thread labeled family, and without reading a single one, I tapped mute. The silence that followed was profound, but my peace was short-lived. An hour later, a different number called, one I recognized. It was my parents' longtime attorney, Frank Belli. His voice was a growly blend of fake warmth and professional menace. Tova, Frank here. Listen, your father is in a state. We need to talk about this misunderstanding. You can't just freeze joint assets. There are legalities. They weren't joint assets, Frank. I said, my voice steady. They were my assets that they had fraudulent access to. I have the documentation. I've already sent a packet to my counsel, Naomi Sinclair. You'll be hearing from her. There was a pause. I could almost hear him recalibrating. Naomi Sinclair from Sterling and Gray. His tone shifted. The faux grandfatherly act dropping. Tova, be reasonable. Dragging lawyers into a family matter. Your parents are devastated. They just want to talk. Come back to the house tomorrow. We can sort this out like adults. The time for sorting was before they forged my signature and used me as a personal line of credit. I said any further communication can go through Miss Sinclair. I ended the call. Naomi had been my secret weapon for months. A razor-sharp financial attorney who had helped me navigate the labyrinth of untangling my finances. She was the one who discovered the full extent of the linkages, the forgeries, the sheer audacity of it all. After my call with Margaret, the bank manager, I'd sent Naomi a prearranged signal. Dinner is served. She would now be executing the next phase. Formal legal notifications, cease and desist letters, and the initiation of a forensic audit. The next morning, I went to the one place that had always been my real sanctuary, the city library. Among the stacks, surrounded by the smell of old paper and quiet industry, I felt safe. I had a plan for today. It was time to look at the house, my parents' house, not as a home, but as evidence. Using public records access at a library terminal, a skill Naomi had taught me, I began to pull documents. The property deed was the first shock. The second mortgage I known about was actually a third. The house was leveraged to its picturesque eaves, but more interesting were the permits. Over the last 2 years, my father had filed for and obtained permits for extensive renovations, a new roof, HVAC system, kitchen remodel, work that had never been done. I cross-referenced the permit numbers with contractor licenses. The company listed was a shell, a name that traced back to a P.O. box. Then I looked at the bank statements I had printed from last night's folder. Large disbursements labeled Contractor Home Improvement had been paid out from the line of credit linked to my savings. The dates matched the permit approvals. They hadn't just been spending my money on their lifestyle. They'd been creating paper trails for phantom renovations likely to secure even more lending against the inflated theoretical value of the house. The house wasn't just a lie. It was a prop in a larger fraud. My phone, still on mute, showed another call from Frank Belli. Then a new text from Marcus. You have 24 hours to fix this or you'll regret it. I ignored it. The threat was empty. His power, like theirs, was borrowed and the bank had just called in a loan. I spent the afternoon at Naomi's sleek downtown office. She greeted me with a firm handshake and no small amount of professional pride. The notifications have been delivered. The freeze is holding. I've also filed a preliminary injunction to prevent them from attempting to transfer or further encumber any of the linked assets, including the house. They are, as they say, locked out. She spread copies of the documents I had found on her conference table. The phantom renovations are clever, she said, tapping the permit forms. A classic way to siphon money and create false equity. The bank that holds the mortgages will be very interested in this. It's loan fraud. Hearing it stated so plainly, so legally made it real in a new way. This wasn't just family drama. It was criminal. A cold knot tightened in my stomach. What happens now? I asked. Now they have a choice, Naomi said, her eyes sharp. They can accept the new reality that their access to your finances is permanently revoked. That they must deal with the consequences of their own debts, or they can fight. Given their history, they'll fight. They'll try to paint you as unstable, ungrateful, or claim you authorized everything. I have the doctor's reports from my health scare, I said, proving I was of sound mind. And I have years of journal entries, emails, where I questioned the loans and was gaslit. Excellent. Naomi nodded. Keep them. The first volley will be emotional. When that fails, it will be legal. We'll be ready. As I left her office, the winter sky was already darkening. I drove across town, not to my apartment, but to my parents' neighborhood. I didn't turn onto their street. I parked a few blocks away and walked. The house looked the same from the outside. A perfect, glowing gingerbread house in the twilight. But as I watched from the shadows of a large oak tree across the street, I saw the cracks. The living room curtain was jerked aside, and my father's silhouette paced like a caged animal. Another figure, Marcus, gestured wildly. No Christmas lights twinkled anymore. The house was dark except for those frantic interior lights. I saw a sleek sedan I didn't recognize parked in the driveway. Frank Belly's car. The Council of War was in session. I stood there in the cold watching the paper house. I thought of all the Christmases inside, the performances, the quiet desperation masked by glitter. I thought of my own complicity, my years of saying yes when I meant no, of confusing obligation with love. A part of me, the little girl who just wanted to be loved, ached to walk up the driveway, open the door, and make it stop. To unfreeze the accounts, to accept their apologies, to go back to being the silent underwriter of their dreams. But the woman I had become, the one who had looked at her own mortality and decided to live, stayed rooted under the tree. That house was not my home. It was a crime scene. And I was no longer a victim hiding the evidence. I was the witness stepping forward. My phone vibrated in my pocket. A single text had broken through the mute. It was from my mother. Your father is having chest pains. This is your fault. Are you happy now? The old hooks, sharp and practiced, dug in. Guilt, that familiar poison, surged. I stared at the words, my breath fogging in the air. Then I thought of the phantom contractor, the forged signatures, the millions in debt they'd built on my back while telling me to be grateful for my security. I typed back, my fingers steady in the cold. If he is unwell, call 911. I am not a doctor, and I am not an ATM. I hit send, turned my back on the glowing windows, and walked to my car. The chest pains were probably stress. Or maybe they were another performance. Either way, I couldn't cure it. I had my own healing to do. The battle lines were drawn. The paper house was already crumbling. I just had to be strong enough not to get buried in the collapse. My mother's text was a masterstroke designed for maximum paralysis. For a few hours, it worked. I sat in my apartment, heart thumping, imagining my father collapsing, the ambulance, the hospital. The guilt was a physical weight. What if it was real? What if my actions, however justified, triggered a real crisis? But Naomi's voice echoed in my mind, cool and rational. They will use every tool in their emotional arsenal. Tova, fear, obligation, guilt. Expect it. Prepare for it. I didn't call. I didn't text back. Instead, I called the only non-emergency number I trusted, the direct line to my father's cardiologist, Dr. Evans, which I'd saved years ago during a genuine scare. His receptionist confirmed he was not on call at the hospital, and my father was not listed as an emergency admission at any of the 3 major medical centers in the area. It wasn't proof, but it was enough to study my nerves. The chest pains, like so much else, were likely part of the performance. The next morning, the war began in earnest. It started with a barrage from all fronts. First, the social front. My phone, still muted for calls, lit up with notifications from social media. Aunt Helen, bless her heart, had sent a gentle, concerned message. Sweetheart, your mother is beside herself. Your father isn't well. Can we talk? But beneath her message in our extended family group chat I'd long since hidden, a different narrative was unfolding. My mother had posted. It wasn't a direct attack. It was a masterpiece of victimhood. A photo of the empty Christmas dinner table. The candles burned low. Captioned, when the spirit of giving is replaced by the coldness of taking, praying for family healing this season. The comments from her circle, women I'd known since childhood, were a symphony of support. So sorry, Eleanor. Some people are just born cold. Family first always. Then came Marcus' contribution. A vague, dramatic post on his professional network. Learning who truly has your back when the chips are down is a painful but necessary lesson. Onward and upward. #resilience, #family business. It was laughable, but it painted a picture. The ambitious son betrayed by a selfish sibling. I didn't engage. I took screenshots, added them to the growing digital file Naomi and I shared. The second front was legal. A courier arrived at my apartment before noon. It was a thick envelope from Frank Belli's firm. I signed for it, my hand only slightly trembling. Inside was not, as I'd half expected, a lawsuit. It was a demand letter. It accused me of financial elder abuse for freezing accounts my elderly parents relied upon for daily living. It claimed I had unduly influenced my grandparents years ago to leave me a small inheritance, a complete fiction. They'd left me their books and little else, which had given me a misplaced sense of entitlement. It demanded I immediately restore all account access, provide a full accounting of my unilateral actions, and attend a family mediation at Frank's office, or they would pursue all available legal and equitable remedies. I almost laughed at the sheer gaslighting audacity. They were accusing me of financial abuse. It was so perfectly textbook them. I scanned every page and emailed it directly to Naomi. Her reply came within minutes. Predictable and baseless. Do not respond. I'll handle. The third front was the direct assault. It came in the late afternoon. I was packing a box of books. The tangible start of my move when my intercom buzzed. I wasn't expecting anyone. I went to the screen. It was Marcus. He was alone, his face a mask of controlled anger. He buzzed again insistently. A part of me wanted to ignore it, to let him stand in the cold. But another part, the part that needed to see this through, to face the monster in the light of day, pressed the talk button. What? Let me— Tova. We need to talk without lawyers. Man to sibling. We have nothing to talk about, Marcus. Dad's in the hospital, he shouted, the control cracking. Is that what you wanted? Are you satisfied? Just let me up for 5 minutes. The guilt knife twisted again, but I remember the call to Dr. Evans' office. Which hospital? What's his room number? I'll call the nurses' station directly. A pause. A too long pause. They're running tests. He's an emergency. Look, just open the door. No, Marcus. My voice was flat. If you have something to say it to the camera. His face contorted. The pleasant entrepreneurial mask fell away completely, revealing something raw and ugly beneath. You selfish bitch, he hissed, the words tinny through the speaker. You think you're so smart? You have no idea what you've done. You've destroyed everything. I've stopped bankrolling the destruction. I corrected. That money was family money. He spat. We built that. Dad built that. You just happened to be the boring one who saved it. We were putting it to work, growing it by losing it on bad bets and designer handbags. I asked, my savings are down over 80% in 5 years. Marcus, your growth looks a lot like decay. He slammed a fist against the brick wall beside the intercom. You're dead to me. You understand that? Dead. But you're not going to walk away with what's ours. We'll drag you through every court. We'll tell everyone what a lying, manipulative psycho you are. That health scare will say it made you paranoid, unstable. Who do you think people will believe? The successful son and his devastated parents, or the lonely, bitter spinster with a grudge? The words were meant to wound, and they did. But they also crystallized something. This wasn't about love, or even about money anymore. It was about power. Their power over me was slipping. And they would use any weapon, any lie to reclaim it. I looked at his furious face on the grainy screen. Say whatever you need to say, Marcus. Do whatever you need to do, but understand this. I have every statement, every forged document, every email where Mom begged for another loan to cover your last failure. I have the proof that the house is a paper fortress, and I'm not hiding it anymore. The next move is yours. But choose carefully. The truth isn't on your side. I released the talk button. He stood there for another minute, staring up at the camera, his chest heaving. Then he turned and kicked a trash can, sending it clattering down the sidewalk before stalking back to his now doubtless declined credit card luxury car. I walked away from the intercom, my legs weak. The confrontation left me shaking, but it also left me clear. There was no going back. There was no happy ending where they saw the error of their ways. This was a fight for my future, and they had declared themselves the enemy. That night, Naomi called. I've drafted the response to Belly's letter. It's a thing of beauty. We don't just deny their allegations. We present a numbered list of their fraudulent activities backed by the evidence we've gathered. We offer them a deal. They walk away, agree to a legal separation of all finances, and we refrain from filing criminal referrals for forgery and loan fraud. If they refuse, we escalate. They'll refuse, I said, my voice tired, but sure. They can't afford to accept. It would mean admitting everything. I know, Naomi said, not unkindly. So, we prepare for escalation. The bank holding the mortgages on the house has been formally notified of the suspected fraudulent permits. They're launching their own audit. When that happens, the paper house will fall. And, Tova, they're going to blame you for that, too. They'll say you tipped off the bank out of spite. Let them, I said, looking out my window at the city lights, my own reflection superimposed over them. I looked tired, but my eyes were steady. I'm done living in their story. Let them tell whatever tale they want. I have the receipts. The Council of War in their glowing house was plotting their next move. But in my quiet apartment with a lawyer who believed in facts and a future I was building for myself, I was no longer just defending. I was preparing to win. A tense, silent week passed. The muted phone still flickered with attempts at contact, pleading, furious, threatening, but I had stopped even looking. The noise was just static from a station I no longer listened to. My energy was focused on two things: packing for my move and building my case with Naomi. Then on a gray Tuesday morning, the first domino fell, and it wasn't one I pushed. My phone rang with an unknown local number. Normally, I'd let it go to voicemail, but something made me answer. Hello, Miss Bell. Tova Bell. A man's voice. Officious and weary. Yes. This is David Chun from the Risk Management Department at First Metropolitan Bank. We hold the primary and secondary mortgages on the property at 1242 Willow Creek Drive. My parents' address. My blood went cold then hot. This was it. I see. How can I help you, Mr. Chin? We're conducting a routine review of certain high-value collateral properties, he said, his tone making it clear this was anything but routine. We've received some conflicting information regarding substantial renovations on this property that were used to justify a recent line of credit increase. Our records show disbursements for a new roof, HVAC, and kitchen remodel. Yet, our exterior audit photos from last month show the original 20-year-old roof and the same outdoor AC unit. I closed my eyes. Naomi's prediction was precise. I'm afraid I can't speak to any renovations, Mr. Chin. I don't live at that address. But you are listed as a financial link on the associated credit products, he pressed. The ones secured against your savings, which we understand have recently been frozen. So, they've been talking to Margaret at my bank. The walls were closing in on them from all sides. That's correct, I said carefully. I've recently become aware of several irregularities regarding my financial links to that property and its owners. I've retained counsel. Her name is Naomi Sinclair. I can have her contact you with any relevant, clears-throat information. There was a pause. I could hear paper shuffling. Sinclair, Sterling, and Gray. Yes, that would be helpful. His voice changed, becoming marginally less adversarial. He was a bank man. He recognized the name of a top-tier law firm and understood what it meant. I wasn't a confused daughter. I was a prepared client. Thank you, Miss Bell. We'll be in touch. I hung up and immediately called Naomi. The bank called. They're auditing the house. Perfect, she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. That's our first domino. They'll find the phantom renovations. Then they'll call in the loans. Your family's reaction to that will be instructive. The reaction came faster than I expected. That evening, my apartment intercom buzzed again. This time it was my mother. Her face on the screen was a shock. The perfectly coiffed hair was disheveled. Her makeup was gone. She looked 10 years older and desperately afraid. Tova, please. Please let me in. I'm alone. It's just me. Her voice cracked. Every instinct screamed. No, this was another tactic. But the raw fear in her eyes, it looked different from the performed tears of Christmas. This felt like the terror of someone watching the ground disappear beneath their feet. Against my better judgment, I buzzed her in. I opened my apartment door but stood in the doorway, blocking entrance. She emerged from the elevator, clutching her coat around her. She looked small, diminished. "What do you want, Mom?" "The bank," she whispered, her eyes wide. "They called Robert. They're saying the renovations were never done. They're talking about fraud. Tova, they could take the house." Real tears spilled over, carving tracks through her pale skin. "It's all falling apart. Marcus funding is gone. Our cards, nothing works. And now this." I felt nothing. No pity. No satisfaction. Just a hollow observation. The renovations were never done. "Mom, the money was spent on other things. You know that we were going to do them," she insisted, the lie automatic. The timing, the contractor failed." "There was no contractor," I said flatly. "It was a shell company. The money went into your accounts and Dad's brokerage and Marcus Ventures. You lied to the bank to get more money, using my savings as collateral." She flinched as if I'd struck her. The denial was on her lips, but it died. The evidence was too concrete, the bank's voice too real in her ears. The facade finally crumbled, not into apology, but into a staggering, selfish despair. "What are we supposed to do?" she wailed. "Not to me, but to the universe. Where will we go? This is your fault. If you hadn't frozen everything, we could have covered it. We could have fixed it." And there it was. Even at the precipice, the blame was mine. The responsibility was mine. The solution was my money. "No, Mom," I said, my voice quiet but absolute in the empty hallway. "You can't fix a lie with more money. You can only dig a deeper hole. The fault is yours. The forgery, the fraud, the decades of taking from me while pretending it was for my own good." She looked at me, then truly looked at me, and I saw dawning horrible realization. It wasn't remorse for how they'd treated me. It was the realization that I was no longer a resource. I was an obstacle, a witness, and I was not moving. "You hate us," she breathed. "I don't hate you," I said, and it was the truth. Hate would have meant they still had power over my emotions. "I'm indifferent. You're no longer my responsibility. You are adults who made terrible choices. You need to deal with the consequences. We're your family." The last desperate weapon. "Family doesn't do this," I said, gesturing to her to the mess she represented. "I'm leaving. I'm moving across the country. I suggest you use the time before the bank forecloses to figure out your next steps, but do not contact me again. All communication goes through Naomi Sinclair." I stepped back into my apartment and began to close the door.
"Tova."
Her shriek was pure, undiluted panic. "You can't do this. You can't abandon us. I'm your mother." I paused. The door opened just a crack. I met her terrified, furious eyes. "You stopped being my mother a long time ago," I said softly. "You became my creditor. And now the dead is called in." I closed the door. The sound of the lock engaging was a firm, final click. I heard a sob, then the sound of her stumbling down the hall. I leaned against the door, my own breaths coming in short gasps. I had faced her. I had held the line. It felt like a victory, but it tasted like ashes. Naomi was right. Their reaction was instructive. When confronted with the consequences, they didn't seek to make amends. They sought to rein me. The first domino had fallen, and instead of trying to stop the chain reaction, they were trying to throw me into its path. The war was far from over, but a major battle had just been won. They knew I wouldn't save them. The last illusion was shattered. Now they were truly cornered. And a cornered animal is at its most dangerous. The silence after my mother's visit was the most unnerving yet. For 3 days, nothing. No calls, no texts, no social media barbs. It was as if they had vanished into the crumbling paper house, plotting their final, desperate move. Naomi warned me this was the calm before the storm. They've tried guilt, threats, and direct confrontation. They've failed. Now they'll go nuclear. They'll aim to destroy your reputation to weaken your position. She was right. The storm broke not with a phone call, but with a public spectacle. It started with a local online community newsletter, the kind filled with fake sale announcements and lost pet notices. Someone had submitted a heartbreaking story about a local family being financially eviscerated by a ruthless relative. It didn't name me, but the details were thinly veiled. The hardworking parents, the successful entrepreneur son, the bitter, unstable daughter who'd suddenly cut them off, jeopardizing their health and home. The comment section populated by my parents' social circle was a festival of outrage. I know exactly who this is about. Shameful. Some people are just born without a conscience. Then it escalated. Marcus gave an interview to a struggling local business podcast. Again, no names, but the story was there. The visionary founder himself, whose big break was stolen by a family member's personal vendetta, forcing him to lay off dedicated staff and put his world-changing idea on hold. He spoke in lofty terms about betrayal and resilience, painting himself as a martyred genius. The most damaging strike came 2 days later. A formal complaint was filed with the state's Adult Protective Services Agency. The allegation: financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. My father, with Frank Belli's help, had officially lodged it. The document claimed his cognitive decline following a recent cardiac event had left him unable to manage his finances, and that I, Tava Bell, had seized control of his assets, frozen him out, and was withholding funds necessary for his medical care and basic living expenses. When Naomi called to tell me, her voice was grim. This is serious, Tova. APS investigations are no joke. They have to follow up. It's a brilliant, dirty move. It frames you as a predator and forces you into a defensive, reactive position. It also creates a public record of the allegation, which can be damaging regardless of the outcome. I felt sick. The sheer malicious creativity of it took my breath away. They were weaponizing the very systems meant to protect people. What do? We fight fire with facts, Naomi said, her tone hardening. We have his medical records from the last 5 years showing no cognitive issues. We have the bank records showing the money flow was from you to him, not the other way around. We have the evidence of forgery. We will present it all unequivocally to the investigator. But Tova, you need to be prepared. An investigator will contact you. They may visit your workplace. This is designed to humiliate and isolate you. The call came the next morning. A polite but firm woman from APS named Gina Rosario. She asked if I would be available for an interview. I said yes, and that my attorney would be present. We scheduled it for my apartment that afternoon. Gina arrived exactly on time. She was in her 40s with a kind but unreadable face and sharp, observant eyes. Naomi was there, a calm, professional presence. We sat at my small dining table. Gina explained the process. I'm here to assess the validity of the complaint. I'll be speaking with your father as well. I need to understand the financial relationship. Naomi slid a thick binder across the table. This should help. What you have been told is a complete inversion of reality. My client Tava Bell is not the explorer. She is the primary victim of a long-gunning financial exploitation scheme by her parents, Robert and Eleanor Bell, and her brother, Marcus Bell. For the next hour, Gina silently paged through the documents. She looked at the side-by-side comparisons of my father's forged signature next to his real one. She examined the bank statements, showing the hemorrhage of my savings into their accounts. She read the emails where my mother pleaded for just one more loan to cover Marcus' debts. She saw the permit fraud evidence Naomi had obtained from the bank. Her expression remained professional, but I saw the slight tightening of her lips as she read. When she finished, she looked up. This is extensive. It's fraud, Naomi said simply. And the APS complaint is a retaliatory fabrication. We have a letter from Dr. Evans, Mr. Bell's cardiologist, stating he has no diagnosis or concern regarding cognitive decline. His recent hospital visit was for stress, not a cardiac event, and he was discharged with a clean bill of health. Gina nodded slowly. She turned to me. Miss Bell, why did you not report this sooner? It was the question I'd been asking myself. I took a breath. Because they're my family, I was taught that family helps no matter what. I confused being helpful with being used. It took a health scare of my own to realize I was funding their lives while having nothing left for my own life. Freezing the accounts wasn't an attack. It was a life-saving procedure. Gina held my gaze for a long moment, then looked back at the binder. I will need to verify some of this independently, but if what you show me is accurate, the complaint is without merit. In fact, she added, a note of steely professionalism entering her voice. The evidence of exploitation appears to flow in the opposite direction. I may have to open a new case. After she left, I slumped in my chair. The emotional toll was immense. Will she believe it? She's a professional. She follows evidence. Naomi said, the evidence is undeniable. This move will backfire on them spectacularly, but the damage to your reputation in the court of public opinion, that's harder to undo. The public smear campaign intensified. The local story got picked up by a slightly larger online news outlet. My name was still not used, but it was an open secret in our community. I started getting looks at the grocery store. A woman from my mother's book club pointedly turned her cart away from me in the dairy aisle. Then the cornered animal made its most reckless move. I was leaving my soon-to-be former workplace after a final meeting when I saw him. Marcus was leaning against my car, arms crossed. He looked gaunt, unshaven, his eyes blazing with a frantic energy.
We need to talk now.
It wasn't a request. We have nothing to talk about. Marcus, move away from my car. You're going to fix this, he said, his voice low and venomous. You're going to call your bank and your lawyer, and you're going to undo it. You're going to tell APS you made a mistake. You're going to sign over power of attorney to Dad, or what? The words came out colder than I intended. He pushed off the car and stepped into my space. I could smell stale coffee and desperation on him. Or I'll make sure you never work in this town again. I'll tell your new employers across the country what a litigious, unstable person you are. I'll post every private thing I know about you online. That health scare, I'll say it was a mental breakdown. That you hallucinated the whole fraud story. The threat was ugly and specific. It crossed a line the other tactics hadn't. This was pure annihilation.
I didn't step back.
I held my ground, looking up at his furious face. Do it, I whispered. He blinked.
What?
Do it, I repeated louder. Post whatever you want. Tell whoever you want. But understand this. For every lie you tell, I will release a document. The forged signature, the phantom contractor invoice, the bank's fraud audit findings. You want to play a game of reputation? Let's play. But I have the truth. And truth, Marcus, has a weight that gossip can't lift. For a second, I saw pure, unadulterated hate in his eyes. Then something else.
Fear.
He saw I wasn't bluffing. He saw that the quiet, compliant sister was gone, replaced by someone with nothing left to lose but her chains.
He leaned in.
His final hiss threat meant for only me. You'll regret this. I promise you. He shoved past me, knocking my shoulder, and strode away. I got into my car, my hands shaking so badly I could barely fit the key in the ignition. I had faced him down, but the encounter left me feeling soiled and exhausted. They were pulling out all the stops, getting dirtier and more personal with each failed attempt. The cornered animal was lashing out blindly, but a blind attack is still dangerous. I drove home, the winter dusk closing in, knowing the storm wasn't over. They had thrown their worst at me. Public shame, legal manipulation, personal threats. I had weathered it. But the cost was written deep in the new lines on my face, in the hollow feeling where my family used to be. The battle was brutal. But the war was still mine to win. They had shown all their cards, and I hadn't even started playing mine. The encounter with Marcus left a residue of dread, but it also solidified my resolve. They had thrown their worst punches. Public slander, a fraudulent APS claim, direct threats. I was still standing, bruised, yes. Exhausted, absolutely, but standing. Naomi called it attrition warfare. They were trying to wear me down, hoping I'd break before they did. What they didn't understand was that my breaking point had already passed 8 months ago in a doctor's office. Everything since was just cleanup. A few days after the parking lot confrontation, Gina Rosario from APS called Naomi. Her investigation was concluding. Based on the evidence, she was dismissing the complaint against me. Furthermore, she was formally opening a case against my parents for financial exploitation of me, a vulnerable adult under the statute, due to the coercive familial relationship and the scale of the fraud. The first domino had triggered a chain reaction no one expected, least of all them. Naomi relayed the news with grim satisfaction. They tried to use the shield as a sword. Now it's turned back on them. This creates a legal record of their abuse. It's powerful leverage. I felt no triumph, only a weary sense of justice finally tilting on its axis. What about the public smear campaign? That, Naomi said, requires a different kind of response, a passive one. We let the truth do the work. She advised against a public rebuttal, against engaging in the gossip. It gives their narrative oxygen, she said. Right now, it's a one-sided story in a small pond. We have the facts. We deploy them surgically where it counts. Where it counted, it turned out, was the bank. First Metropolitan Bank completed its audit. The findings were catastrophic for my family. Loan fraud based on fabricated renovations. Inflated asset valuation. They issued a formal notice of default and called in the full balance of both mortgages and the linked line of credit, a sum in the high six figures. They gave my parents 30 days to pay in full or face foreclosure proceedings. This was no longer about my frozen accounts. This was about the fundamental collapse of their entire financial house of cards. The paper house was officially condemned. The news must have hit them like a physical blow. The silence from their end became absolute. A true silence of shock. I imagine the chaos inside 1242 Willow Creek Drive. The panic, the recriminations, the frantic, futile calls to other banks, to Frank Belly, to anyone who would listen. I didn't have to imagine for long. A week after the bank's decision, I received a letter, not from a lawyer, but from my father, his familiar looping handwriting on thick stationery. My name on the envelope. My hands were steady as I opened it. Tova, we are at the end. The bank is taking the house. Your mother is a wreck. Marcus has nothing. We have nothing. Is this what you wanted to see us, homeless and broken? We made mistakes. We should have been more transparent. But what you are doing is not justice. It is cruelty. You have the power to stop this. You can unfreeze the accounts.
You can talk to the bank.
You can save your family's home.
Come to the house on Sunday.
Let us talk. No lawyers, just family. We can find a solution. We are still your parents. You are still our daughter. Please, Dad. The letter was a masterpiece of revisionist history. Mistakes not transparent. A far cry from forgery and fraud. It was a plea wrapped in a guilt trip, a final, desperate attempt to re-engage me on emotional terrain. I showed it to Naomi. They're capitulating, she said, analyzing it. They're not admitting to the fraud, but they're admitting they can't win. They're suing for peace. On their terms, of course, your surrender. I'm not going, I said. I think you should, Naomi replied, surprising me. I stared at her.
Why?
It's a trap. More manipulation. It's an opportunity, she corrected. Right now, this is a financial and legal battle. But for you, it's also emotional. You need closure. Seeing them in the reality they created, hearing what they have to say when all other options are gone, it might give you that. And practically, it might give us a recorded admission of some kind. We'll be prepared. She insisted. I wear a discreet recording device for your protection. She said, if they threaten you again, we have it. If they admit anything, we have it. You are under no obligation to speak. Just listen. Sunday arrived cold and bright. I drove to Willow Creek for what I knew would be the last time. The house looked different in the harsh winter light.
Shabby.
The paint on the shutters was chipped. A gutter hung loose. The perfect facade was cracking, revealing the neglect beneath. I parked on the street, not in the driveway. I took a deep breath, activated the recorder in my coat pocket, and walked to the front door. My mother answered. She looked hollowed out, dressed in simple clothes I hadn't seen in years. No pearls. She didn't speak, just stepped back to let me in. The interior was a shock. Boxes were piled everywhere. The expensive art was gone from the walls, probably sold. The house smelled of dust and defeat. My father sat in his armchair in the living room, a shell of his former imposing self. Marcus was nowhere to be seen. "Sit," my father said, his voice growly. I remained standing near the doorway. "I'm here. I'm listening." My mother wrung her hands. Tova looked around. "This is it. We have to be out in 3 weeks. We have nowhere to go." I said nothing. "The bank, they won't negotiate." My father continued, his eyes fixed on the cold fireplace. "They say the fraud, the permits." He couldn't even say it fully. "We need money for a deposit on an apartment for moving. Just something to start over." "You have the money from the line of credit you took out," I said. "The one based on the fake renovations gone," my mother whispered. "Marcus Venture, it needed one more infusion, we thought." Of course, they'd poured the last of the stolen money into the final failing dream. The irony was complete. "So, you want me to give you more?" I stated. "We want you to help," my father insisted, finally looking at me. There was no anger left in his eyes, just a bewildered desperation. "How can you stand there and watch this happen? We raised you. We clothed you. We sent you to college." "You did?" I agreed. "And I repaid that 100 times over with interest, with my financial security, with my peace of mind. The debt is paid, Dad. In full." He flinched. "So that's it. You wash your hands of us." "You washed your hands of me a long time ago," I said, my voice quiet but clear in the empty room. "You just kept them out to take from me. I'm not giving you any more money. Not a single dollar. You need to figure this out. Sell what's left.
Get jobs.
Downsize. Do what everyone else does." My mother let out a choked sob. "You're heartless." "No," I said, turning to her. "I was heartbroken for years now. I'm just realistic. The truth has a weight, Mom. You built a life on lies, and that weight has finally crushed you. I won't crawl under the rubble with you." I turned to leave. This was the closure Naomi spoke of. Not the reconciliation, but a final clear-eyed look at the wreckage. There was no love here, no remorse, only a bottomless sense of entitlement, even in their downfall.
"Wait."
My father's voice stopped me. He stood up unsteady. For a second, I saw the ghost of the man who used to intimidate me. "If you walk out that door, you're no daughter of mine.
You're dead to this family.
Forever." I met his gaze. I felt nothing. No sting, no grief, just a final release. "I was dead to you a long time ago," I said. "You just forgot to stop spending my inheritance." I walked out of the house for the last time. I didn't look back. As I drove away, I didn't feel the crushing guilt I'd feared. I felt a vast empty space. A space where their noise used to be. It wasn't filled with happiness, but it was clean. It was mine. The truth had a weight, and I had finally set it down. The space left behind after the final meeting was immense. It wasn't a quiet peace at first. It was a roaring silence, like the aftermath of an explosion where your ears are still ringing. I moved through the final days of packing my apartment in a kind of trance. The legal and financial battles were still winding down, but the emotional war was over. I had walked off the battlefield. The emptiness where my family had been was both terrifying and liberating. Naomi handled the fallout from the bank's foreclosure and the APS case. Quietly, they attempted to sue the bank, claiming they were misled. It went nowhere. They tried to get the APS finding overturned. It was denied. Frank Belli, sensing a sinking ship, withdrew as their counsel. The reality was now inescapable. They would lose the house. They would have to find a small rental, likely using what little they could salvage from selling the remaining furniture and my mother's jewelry. Marcus, according to a tidbit Naomi heard through the legal grapevine, had finally taken a salary job, a massive blow to his self-styled, visionary identity. I didn't celebrate their downfall. I just observed it from a distance, like watching a storm recede on the horizon. The shot and Freude I expected never came. Instead, there was a profound sadness for the lives they had chosen to live. Lives of such desperate pretense that they had sacrificed their only genuine connection, however flawed, in the process. My own life began to fill the empty space slowly with things I chose. My promotion was official. I was moving to head a new financial literacy program at a community college on the West Coast. It was meaningful work far from the cold numbers of portfolio management, and it felt like a purpose I had built myself. A week before my move, I was clearing out a closet when I found a small dusty box labeled in my grandmother's handwriting. For Tova's dreams, I'd forgotten about it. She had given it to me when I graduated college, telling me to open it when I felt lost. In the chaos of the following years, I'd buried it. I sat on the floor and opened it. Inside weren't valuables. There was a handwritten note from her. My clever girl, don't let the world make you small. Your mind is your greatest fortune. Use it to build a life that feels like sunshine. Beneath it were a few old savings bonds she'd bought me as a child, now matured, and a list she'd made of my childhood dreams. Enographer, bookstore owner, person who helps people understand money. Tears streamed down my face, not from sadness, but from a piercing sense of being seen.
She had seen me. She had believed in me.
And I had spent years letting other people's noise drown out her voice. The bonds weren't worth a fortune, but together they were enough for a down payment on a reliable used car for my cross-country drive. It felt like a gift from the past, a vote of confidence for the future. The day before I left, Aunt Helen called. Her voice was hesitant. Tova, I know things are broken. I don't pretend to understand it all, but I want you to know I love you, and I'm so sorry I didn't see what was happening. Her words were a bomb. Thank you, Aunt Helen. That means a lot. I heard you're moving. Your mother. She told me she's devastated. But Tova, she's devastated about the house, about the money. I'm not sure she's devastated about losing you. And that breaks my heart for you. Hearing someone else acknowledge that painful truth was a strange relief.
It's okay, I said.
And for the first time, I almost meant it. I'm going to be okay. I know you are, she said firmly. You always were the strong one. You just didn't know it. The morning of my departure was clear and cold. I loaded the last box into my packed car. I took one final look at my empty apartment, a blank slate. Then I got in the driver's seat, entered the coordinates for my new city into the GPS, and pulled away from the curb. As I drove through the city limits, a weight I hadn't even known I was carrying began to lift. With every mile, the static of the past year faded. I played music loudly. I sang off-key. I stopped at a roadside diner and ate pie for breakfast just because I could. The emptiness inside me wasn't empty anymore. It was being filled with the hum of the engine, the unfolding map on my screen, the sheer expansive possibility of the open road. I was not running away. I was driving toward a job I wanted, toward a coast I'd never seen, toward a life where my worth wasn't measured by what I could provide for others, but by the peace I could build for myself. Halfway through Nebraska, my phone buzzed with a calendar alert I'd set months ago. It simply said, the first day. I smiled. It was I still thought of them, of course. I wondered where they would end up. I felt flickers of the old guilt, but they were just echoes now, growing fainter. They had made their choices. I had finally made mine. The cord wasn't just cut. It had dissolved. I was untethered. And for the first time in my life, that didn't feel like falling. It felt like flying. The empty space was gone. In its place was the widest, blessed sky I had ever seen. The Pacific Ocean was nothing like I had imagined. I'd pictured postcard calm, but my first sight of it from the cliffside highway was a roaring, endless expanse of gray-green power throwing itself against the rocks with a sound like a perpetual mighty sigh. It wasn't peaceful. It was alive. It felt like a truth I needed to hear. My new apartment was small, a studio with a view of other buildings, but it had large windows that filled it with the unique soft light of the coast. The first night, I slept on a camping mattress surrounded by boxes, and I slept more deeply than I had in years. There was no background hum of dread, no anticipation of the next demand, just the unfamiliar silence of a city where no one knew my name, my past, or what they could take from me. Starting the new job was a gentle shock to my system. At the community college, I wasn't Tova the human ATM or Tova the disappointing daughter. I was Professor Bell, the new head of the Financial Empowerment Initiative. My students were single parents, retirees wanting a second act, young adults navigating their first bank accounts. They looked at me not with expectation, but with curiosity, some with hope. I taught them about compound interest, but also about the psychology of spending, about setting boundaries, about the difference between a want and a need. With every lesson, I felt like I was healing a part of myself. I bought furniture piece by piece, choosing things I loved. A deep blue sofa, a bookshelf for my grandmother's books, a sturdy desk. I didn't consult anyone's taste but my own. The process was slow, deliberate, and profoundly satisfying. Naomi kept me updated from afar. The foreclosure on my parents' house was finalized. They moved into a 2-bedroom apartment in a complex on the other side of the city, from their old neighborhood. Marcus' salary job was in middle management at a tech firm, a far cry from CEO of his own startup. According to the last legal filing Naomi saw, they were making payments on a structured settlement to repay a fraction of the funds they'd taken, a settlement I had insisted be paid not to me, but to a debt relief charity. I didn't want their money. I wanted the principal acknowledged in a court of law, and it was. The news was a dine in my new life, a story about other people. I felt a distant pity, but no pull. The hooks were truly gone. 3 months after my arrival, I was invited to a faculty gathering at the home of a colleague, Leo, who taught sociology. It was a casual potluck in a backyard with fairy lights. I brought a store-bought salad, feeling shy, but people were warm. They talked about books, about the frustrating campus parking, about a local hiking trail. No one asked about my family. No one needed anything from me. I stood by the fence watching the easy laughter and felt a strange, quiet joy seep into my bones. This was what ordinary life felt like. It was a revelation. Leo brought me a drink. You settling in? Okay. West Coast treating you well? It is, I said, and it was the simplest, most complete truth. It really is good, he smiled. It's nice to have you here. Later that week, I finally made the trip to the actual shore. I drove to a quiet rocky beach, not the tourist spot. The wind whipped my hair, and the salt spray stung my lips. I took off my shoes and walked to the very edge where the foam hissed over the sand. The water was freezing. It shocked my system awake. I thought about the Christmas dinner. The phone on the table, the word initiate. It felt like a story from someone else's life. A dark fairy tale. The woman who had done that was me. But she was also a stranger. A desperate, courageous stranger fighting her way out of a coffin. I had come out the other side. Not unscarred, but whole. The lies they told at that dinner had been the catalyst, not for my destruction, but for my rebirth. They said I was begging for money by withholding it. In reality, I was begging for my life, and I had received it. I sat on a driftwood log and watched the horizon until the sun began its spectacular descent into the water, painting the sky in colors I had no name for. In that moment, I felt a gratitude so vast it was almost painful. Not for the hardship, but for my own strength. For the quiet voice inside that had finally shouted enough. For the grandmother who had left me a note in a box. For the lawyer who believed in facts. For the ocean which reminded me that some things are too powerful to control, only to respect and admire. I drove home as the stars emerged, the salty smell clinging to my skin. My small, imperfect apartment felt like a palace. It was mine. Every spoon, every book, every quiet moment was mine. The new shore was not just a coastline. It was the solid ground I had built beneath my own feet. The past was a country I had left. I was a citizen of this new quiet nation of one. The war was over. I had not just survived. I had arrived. A year to the day after the Christmas dinner that changed everything, I found myself not in a house filled with tension and glittering lies, but in a bright, sun-drenched classroom. My students, a mix of ages, backgrounds, and dreams, were presenting their final projects for my Financial Foundations for Life course. One by one, they stood up not to talk about getting rich, but about gaining freedom. Maria, a single mother of 2, presented a simple color-coded budget that would finally get her out of payday loan debt. "It's not about the numbers," she said, her voice firm with a pride I recognized. "It's about knowing no one can take this choice away from me." An older man, Henry, shared his plan to downsize his home to unburden his retirement, not as a loss, but as a strategic gain for peace. A young man named Ben, who reminded me a little of Marcus, but with earnest eyes, outlined a savings plan for trade school, rejecting his family's pressure to take on prestigious debt for a university degree he didn't want. As I listened, a profound sense of completion settled over me. This was the legacy I was building. Not a fortune, but a fortress of knowledge for others. I was breaking a cycle, not just for myself, but in some small way for them, too. After class, I walked back to my office, which now held photos of the rocky coast, my thriving bookshelf, and a framed copy of my grandmother's note. My phone buzzed. It was an email from Naomi with the subject line, "Case closed." The final legal threads had been tied. The structured settlement with my parents was fulfilled. All civil actions were dismissed. The APS case was formally archived. Legally, financially, it was over. The paper trail had reached its final page. Attached was a scanned copy of a document, a formal release. At the very bottom, I saw my father's signature. It looked frail. I felt nothing but a faint, distant echo of the storm. I typed a brief reply. "Thank you, Naomi, for everything." She wrote back instantly. "You did the hard part. Go live your life, Tova. It's a good one." That evening, I drove to my favorite spot on the coast. It was a clear, cool night. I sat on the same driftwood log wrapped in a thick sweater and watched the bioluminescent waves crash against the shore, leaving fleeting trails of ghostly blue light in the dark. It was magic, real, natural, demanding nothing from me. I thought about the quiet nation I had built within myself. Its constitution was simple: respect, honesty, and the sovereign right to peace. Its population was one, and it was thriving. I didn't hate my family. I had moved beyond them to a place where they were no longer the defining geography of my heart. They were a historical footnote, a cautionary tale of what happens when love is twisted into transaction. I hoped in some detached way that they found their own version of peace, however small. But their happiness was no longer my responsibility. Their disaster no longer my emergency. My story wasn't about revenge. It was about reclamation. I hadn't taken anything from them that was ever truly theirs. I had simply taken myself back. The woman who smiled at the Christmas table, who made that call, she wasn't a villain. She was a rescue worker pulling her own soul from the wreckage. As I stood to leave, a couple walked by, laughing, their hands linked. I felt a pang, not of loneliness, but of anticipation. My quiet nation was open for trade. It was ready for connection, for real connection, built on mutual ground, not shifting sand. There was space for that now. I drove home under a sky full of stars I was still learning the names of. My phone was silent, and the silence was no longer a weapon or a burden. It was a gift. It was the sound of my own thoughts, my own choices, my own life. If you're watching this, maybe you're in the middle of your own Christmas dinner disaster. Maybe the lies are being told right to your face, and the people who should love you are nodding along. Maybe you feel like you're begging just to be seen while they call you selfish for wanting to keep what's yours. I'm here to tell you that the quiet inside you, that voice that says this is wrong, that's not weakness. That's your strength whispering. You can build a new shore. You can found your own quiet nation. It starts with one word. No, it starts with one call. It starts with choosing yourself, not out of spite, but out of survival. And then one day out of love. The truth has a weight. But you don't have to carry their lies anymore. You can set it down. You can walk away. And you can build a life so full of your own light that the shadows they cast can't reach you anymore. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever had to choose between your family and your freedom, tell me where you're watching from in the comments below. Share your story. You're not alone. And if you're fighting your way out, hit that subscribe button. We're building a community here, not of victims, but of survivors, of founders of our own quiet, powerful nations. Thank you for watching. Now go live your truth. It's waiting for you.